Good evening. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown. I am happy to be here with you on tonight. I say Happy New Year to you all. I want to give you the opportunity to give your city and state where you're hailing from. We want to make sure that we shout your city and state out on tonight. We are so grateful to be in a new year on this evening. We are grateful for this first show in the new year, and we know that it is going to be exciting. And so thank you to you all that are saying already, welcome back. We are glad to be back. And we say good evening to everyone. Make sure that you tell us where you're from. Make sure that you share this, if you will. We are on Facebook Live. Share on Twitter, share on Instagram, share on YouTube, on all the social media platforms that we are on. Let somebody know that this conversation is happening tonight. I see people are from Chicago, Illinois in the house. Burlington, North Carolina is in the house with us tonight. Washington, D.C. is here. Cincinnati, Ohio is in the house tonight. Houston, Texas is in the house. St. Louis, Missouri is here. We are so excited. Listen, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma is here. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is in the house. Atlanta, Georgia, of course, we can't go nowhere without Atlanta not being in the house. We're so happy. Dallas, Texas is here with us tonight. Wilmington, North Carolina is here with us tonight. I love that you are shouting out your places online. This is quite wonderful to have people from all over the country that are here with us. Of course, we can't go nowhere without Oakland, California. Toronto is on YouTube with us. Yes, Toronto. Thank you for being here. Tacoma, Washington is here tonight. New Iberia, Louisiana. Come on, all the way down in Louisiana, they're here. Columbus, Ohio is here. Garner, North Carolina is here in the house. Please, please, please keep sharing, you all. This is going to be a wonderful, wonderful conversation on tonight. We want to know where you're coming from. And as you keep putting it up, I'll keep shouting it out as we go along. Again, we ask that you share on all social media platforms tonight that we are on. Beyond the Gatekeepers, we can be found on Facebook, and we can be also found on Instagram and Twitter. And of course, last but certainly not least, we can be found on YouTube. Hampton, Virginia, we see you. San Leandro, California, we see you. Coldwell, Pennsylvania, we see you too. And so on tonight, let me bring forth those who will help me to maneuver this conversation tonight. We know them. They are not guests. They help to co-host this show, and I'm so happy to have them here yet another year in the person of Bishop Carlton D. Pearson. He is an author, progressive spiritual teacher, and thought leader. Bishop Pearson, will you please greet our platform this new year of 2022?
Well, happy new year to every single one of you, and happier new you. Wherever you are in life, whatever the level of consciousness you embrace or is embracing you, whatever circumstances or situations surround your life, whatever threats or blessings, curses, whatever you're wrestling with, determine in your heart and in your soul that this is going to be a year that you stay centered, focused, anchored, and intentional. Let's start the year out that way, because it's going to be a rough ride. I'm telling you now, some pretty unseemly things are going to occur over the next 12 months that are going to be very shocking. But things are never as bad as they seem. They can always be worse. They're never as good as they seem. They can always be better. So make sure you find that happy, holy medium. That's where the grace lives.
Beautiful, Bishop. So glad to see you. You look wonderful. We appreciate that so very much. And so now we want to go on. And of course, we cannot do the show without her in the person of Bishop Yvette Adrian Flunder. She is our presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. First and foremost, she is the senior pastor of City of Refuge, United Church of Christ in Oakland, California. Bishop Flunder, will you come and greet our audience for 2022?
Welcome, welcome, welcome back, family. It is so good. It's good to see Bishop-elect Brown. It's good to see Bishop Carlton Pearson. And it is good to see all of the cities and localities where we are from all over the country and world. I'm so thrilled to be back with you. It's quite an interesting break time. Many, 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 many things occurred during that time. And I can't go further without calling the name of Bishop Wyatt I. Greenlee Jr., our administrative assistant and in many ways co-founder of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, that is dancing with our ancestors in the presence of God, even now. And what a joy and a blessing to be back. What a joy and an honor to welcome our guest who will be with us this evening, and to be able to talk about some of the things that we need to talk about in terms of getting ready for our role in God's what's next. God has an intention for those who have been most marginalized by both church, religion, and society. And so we are thrilled. And he is going to be introduced in just a moment. So God bless you and welcome, welcome, welcome back. And we are thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder. So good to have you here again with us on this brand new year. And certainly our guest is here in the person of Reverend Dr. Earle J. Fisher, Ph.D., author, pastor, and community organizer. Reverend Dr. Earle, please, please, please come and greet our audience tonight.
Well, good evening, brothers, sisters, friends, and kin. I greet you with the joy of Jesus, the Black Messiah, and the love of the Lord. I am extremely honored and grateful to share this space with these wonderful people. I said before the show, and I'm just going to say it again, we should rename this episode Three Bishops and a Jackleg. And I cannot believe, out of all of the wonderful and magnificent people that they know, they decided to start the year off with me. So, Bishop Pearson, you're probably right. It's going to be a rough year. If this is how we start, I don't know what's next. But seriously, it is a profound privilege and a deep joy to share this space with all of you. I've admired and appreciated, especially what you have meant, what all of you have meant for the struggle for social justice and Black liberation in this country and beyond. What you all mean in terms of progressive and prophetic voices in the church writ large and in the Black church in particular. So I consider it a honor and a joy to share this space with y'all. Thank y'all for having me. And I saw all of those shout outs and cities. Memphis is in the house tonight. Okay, let's just be very, very clear. Memphis, by way of Ben Harbor, Michigan, is in the house tonight. So thank y'all for having me.
That's so wonderful. Yes, Memphis is in the house. Edgewood, Washington is in the house. Listen, I got to call out this person's name specifically. Mother Lucky Allen is in the house from City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California, where her bishop is Bishop Yvette Flunder. We also have Richmond, California, Rochester, New York, y'all. They in here. Philadelphia is here. Again, I told y'all Chicago. Centennial, Colorado is here. Durham, North Carolina is here. I'm very happy. Of course, New York City is here and New Jersey is here. And somebody just said blessings from Tennessee. So you got people from all around Tennessee that are here. Let me lay a quick foundation to this conversation tonight. And so Dr. Earle has written a book, and the book is called Reverend Albert Cleage Jr. and the Black Prophetic Tradition, a reintroduction of the Black Messiah. And what he's doing is he considers how Albert Cleage Jr. in his groundbreaking book of sermons, The Black Messiah, which was written in 1969, reconfigures the rules of the game as it relates to Christianity and the social political realities of Black people in Detroit and across the country. And so he's taking a rhetorical approach. This book will explore how and what the Black Messiah 1969 has contributed to the broader scope of Black liberation theology and Black religious rhetoric. And so I want to start this conversation off again by saying thank you so very much, Dr. Fisher, for being here with us tonight. And we want this to be an engaging conversation. We know that you're going to have questions, and we're going to give opportunity for that. But I want to start off, if I can, Dr. Fisher, with a question for you that will help to also build the foundation and bring both bishops into the conversation as well. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So in the book, you write, the Black Messiah is a wonderful tool to explore rhetorical offerings, strategies, and production, but will not be understood or appreciated if religious rhetoric is continually demonized and ostracized because of its conventional associations. You say we must reconsider not only rhetoric's relationship with religious studies as a social science, but also Afrocentricity writ large as an irreplaceable piece of the puzzle of rhetoric's potential to understand and change society. And that's a long sentence. But my question to you is, how do you believe religious rhetoric and Afrocentricity have been neglected in academia? And how do you hope your work helps to change that? Let's start off with that.
Well, first, thank you again for the opportunity and for reading that excerpt. I remember in times past, I would hear people read people's stuff, and I'd be like, man, I wish I wrote that. Well, guess what? I actually wrote that one, and I think that it does get at the heart of what is next for us, as Bishop Flunder said something about, what is God's next. There has been a long-standing dismissal of the Black religious experience, in particular the Black experience more generally. There has been a demonization of Black religion and Black faith in the academy, and it's even seeped into some sectors of the Black community. And so in our current and contemporary context, we're having conversations in churches and around the country, in movement spaces, in living rooms, and in dining rooms about what the role of religion is. And one of the things I'm hoping to do is reclaim a figure that seems to have been underappreciated, in part because he represents a certain militancy within the Christian faith tradition that I think mainstream and more moderate Christian circles tend to not want to wrestle with and grapple
Can I
with.
stop you
So
here? If you
sure.
tell me about that militancy that you're talking about.
Yeah. So generally the frames of the Black religious experience that have been front and center have been Dr. King's peaceful nonviolence and pacifism on the one end, and then Malcolm's, nationalist militancy on the other end. So what do you do when you have people who are unapologetically Christian, that do not flinch insofar as the origins of Christianity represent Africa and African traditional religions that we need to reclaim, and are willing to engage in a public and political theology at the heart of the Black Power movement? So, part of what I'm saying is we cannot keep allowing white academic and white theological frames to situate how we have a conversation about Black faith and Black religion. You can't discuss Bishop Pearson or Bishop Flunder or yourself and what you are doing in theological publics, in religious centers, and in the pulpit, exactly, like the pulpit proper, without considering these origins of these African religions. It's not generally done in the academy. People thumb their nose at religion in general. I've been in conversations with some of my classmates who thought they were dropping intellectual bombs because they said Abraham Lincoln talked about a house divided. I'm like, you know where he got that from? Got that from the Bible, but y'all don't really read it. Y'all think that is an irrelevant book. Well, there's an ancient African proverb that says, and a fool says there is no God, and in Africa there are no such fools. So I am using Clegg and his sermonic presentation, his sermonic material, to get us to have more conversations about different forms and fashions of our religious tradition that had a wonderful and fantastic impact on our people in one of the most, if not the most crucial moment in the country. And that's at the height of the civil rights and Black Power movement.
So really quickly, I need to read a comment. And somebody said that Carter G. Woodson once said that the academy does not prepare ministers to preach, teach, and lead ordinary Black people in order to thrive.
Yes.
And that
so, yeah, I affirm that and try to deal with that in part in pulling Albert Clegg back into the center of the conversation about Black theology. Because Albert Clegg is actually the person who coins the phrase Black liberation theology. Albert Clegg's book, The Black Messiah, comes out a year before James Cone's book, Black Theology and Black Power. James Cone, in his most recent book, God Bless His Soul, and May He Rise in Power, actually talks exactly about the influence that Clegg had on Cone when Cone was teaching at Albion College. But most of us know more about Cone than we do about Clegg, because the way Black theology has been presented from the standpoint of the white academy and not necessarily the front lines of the Black church. So again, this is why it's important when you have scholar practitioners and people who are doing this type of work on the front lines and integrating their theological convictions within a congregational context, brought back to the forefront of the conversation. It's a benefit to the academy if they are for real, and most of them aren't, but for those who may be for real about getting to the truth and to the heart of what Black faith and the Black prophetic tradition is. And it's important to the church as we try to figure out ways to live out a faith that should empower and emancipate our people, not just get us to shout and dance and keep our chains.
So what I'm going to go to Bishop Flunder and Bishop Pearson, because you talking about something that Bishop Flunder always talks about, and what I kind of hear, what I think I'm hearing is the underpin is that we need a new canon. We need a new canon, because this is what Bishop Flunder has been saying, with some Black theologians up in there to put it in the mix to enter the academy, because we tired of talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, God rest his soul too, and we tired of talking about Bart and all of these other people, and it's not liberative in the ways that it needs to be for Black people. So Bishop Flunder and Bishop Pearson, can you all say more about what Dr. Fisher is saying? Bishop, you're muted.
Well, of course, about 15 different things flooded into my my head. Thank God it's large enough to hold on to. It's just, but there's several things that came to my mind. I think I feel very strongly. I pair this with the conversation about critical race theory, and the reason that I pair it with this is because there's a movement to make us forget what actually happened, what happened to us, what was said about us, a movement to hush certain voices, certain opinions, certain ideas, to diminish, to your earlier point, Dr. Fisher, diminish some of the writers, some of the front runners, and to choose essentially and iconize someone who is less and sometimes less dangerous and problematic than some of the people who said some things that didn't fit well in the thoughts and ideas. And all of us know something about what it is like to disappear people and to disappear their ideas and to disappear their, because they are, and even as it relates to someone like Martin Luther King, he gets about 5 or 6 comfortable quotes that come every time his time comes, as though there wasn't anything else written, as though there wasn't anything else said. And those are the quotes that are the most comfortable by the people who would in some way use him as an example of one of the Negroes that we will continue to quote, essentially an example of a comfortable Negro in some ways. Though he said some sharp things, they'll use some quasi-sharp things in order to sort of dumb down and also to appear to not be racist. I think that's also an important piece. So to go back and get these thoughts and these ideas and bring them to the front and from their source, first of all, God bless you for your research. Bring them to the front so that we can understand what is the home of a lot of this. Bishop Pearson and I are both Pentecostal in terms of our rearing and children of Azusa Street, and the children of the children of the children of the children of Azusa Street. And that's the truth. But there were things that happened in those moments that were freedom statements and liberating statements, as much as we could in the environment. But those aren't the things that people remember. What they remember are the things that have to do with what they want to have revealed today, what they want to have said during the time in which we live. It doesn't take many years to turn the narrative into something comfortable. It doesn't take, and I'll go back to what Bishop Vanessa said a minute ago. Sometimes I wonder, Dr. Fisher, Bishop Pearson, what was it even in the Holy Writ that we read? What was it that they said before somebody said, we're going to take that out? What I wonder, if you allow me just a moment to say, I just wonder, what did somebody say before somebody said, we can't put this out? We can't. Okay, so we're going to, and nobody, everybody's going to be mad. Just take that whole part out right there. Just, what did Jesus say that we don't get? You know, what did Moses say that we don't get? What did, and I think about all of the writ that wasn't canonized. What did people say that we don't get? And what can we do about that when we are seeking to put a finger on what needs to be said that has been, and why it is so hard to apply revisionist theory essentially to things that need to be heard in a time like this? I hope that's not too many things.
No, that's perfect. Can I don't know, Bishop Pearson, if you wanted to chime in. I want to try to add a nugget on top of what Bishop Flunder just shared. Some things that's sparking up in me. One of the things that comes to mind immediately is how enslavers edited what they gave the enslaved access to, because they were concerned that if they encountered the essence of what the scripture said, the enslaved would be moved to revolt. So what we have are, and to the point of this entire broadcast, we have white and white adjacent gatekeepers that curate our characters in our conversation to try to make sure nobody really says, no, we're going to burn the slave master's house down.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
anybody who says that is automatically pushed to the margins. Anybody who doesn't fit within that, what you call the respectable Negro or the nice Negro, because we know anybody who studies King for real knows 67, 68, he's saying the stuff that gets him killed in Memphis. But we don't quote that. We don't even quote the whole broken promises sermon, not that I have a dream. That's just the close. Isn't it somehow we love to shrink folks to the close of a sermon? The broken promises speech. Like we don't even listen to the whole thing. We just listen to the close. So I think you are describing exactly what I'm trying to intervene into, this curated environment where white and white adjacent, even white folks in blackface, try to gatekeep who gets access to the corridors of the conversation about the Black church and the characters who are
Yes.
important, so that we don't ultimately use the Black church. And this one thing Clegg always advocated for, and you all have lived into this too. I'm trying to live into it as well, and others are as well. Just a few of us try to use the Black church as the institution for the revolution.
Yeah. That's good.
That's real good. Bishop Pearson?
I think it's important for us to realize when we talk about the Bible that the Judeo-Christian Bible is a book written by Jews, to Jews, for Jews, about a Jewish understanding of divinity or the divine and or God. Those Jews were Black, including Abraham. Honest Jews will tell you that the earliest Jews, including Abraham, Sarah, even Hagar was from Egypt. Jesus and Mary had relatives in Egypt. That's northern Africa. So it only got confused when it moved west to Europe, from the Greek Septuagint to the Latin Vulgate, and then King James, of course, who, and I've said often that particular white evangelicals get King James and King Jesus mixed up, thinking they're the same people. They think that going into all the world came out of London, not Jerusalem. And Jesus, even in Aramaic, and he didn't speak Greek, and none of them spoke English. He would have said, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all of creation. But in the English language, creatures, which is the way King James, and the book that he wrote before he signed King James Version, was a book about witchcraft. He was really heavily into witchcraft, believed in witches, feared them, and felt they were hindering the flow of his kingdom or his nation. He was very superstitious, died in a lot of pain, and his fingernails fell out. He was very sick. He was bloated. He was in a lot of misery in his life. So when you think about his take, the 13 colonies, into the 13 stripes and Freemasonry and secret societies and secret schools and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of twisted, contorted ways that came out of Europe, the Illuminati, 1776, just like the United States. And so that's white men. Hitler Aryanized Jesus so that Christians would support his hatred of Jews. Christians have an issue of Jews killing Jesus. And so there's a lot of contortions in there that we need to bring out. When the true African influence is evident, and that's what I think you're doing, Dr. Fisher, you're forcing, and you're going to have more success now than anybody would have had before you. All the great names, theologians, scholars you've mentioned have gone, but you're here. And so you're bringing it at a time when the species is being upgraded, and the whole human race and the planet and the universe is cleansing and clearing and correcting itself. This year, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of these white angry people are going to go into the streets with guns, knives, bombs. They want war. They're going to do war. They know they're not going to win, but they want to go down fighting. So some things will come out about the Catholic Church, about religion, about secret society, all that stuff, maybe even extraterrestrial stuff's coming out in 2022. That's going to make what you're saying much more palatable and much more easy. Now, just a few years after 1611, the first legitimate slaves arrived on American soils. Go ye out of the world, preach the gospel to every creature. enslave them, and save them. Teach them our language, English. Teach them our logos. And that's what they've done to us. So the black church is really in being manipulated by what Massa told us and taught us, much of which is inaccurate. So this never in history is what you're doing and writing and saying going to fly better. It's just going to flow. It's just going to get out there. People are going to get into this and believe it and understand it, especially the younger generation. So we're on to something very, very hot and very holy, in my opinion.
Yes and amen.
Yes and amen is right. I think you're 100% right, Bishop. Because let me just say, the Facebook Live is hot. Okay, I want to say thank y'all for sharing and liking, and we got people from everywhere. And I need to read this comment because I think it's important. We've got Patrick Dugan is here from Hempstead, New York, in here, and they are rallying up the place. Nicholas O'Rourke says, particularly in a digital virtual age, video archive, of course, is new canon material, and so people are saying that us being on this platform is already starting a new canon. We better watch it. We better watch ourselves. Now, I want to say this to you all because I think this is very important. And I see you all still shouting out the places that you are in and shouting out the Bishop Pearson, Bishop Flunder, also shouting out Reverend Earle J. Fisher. I think you're going to sell some books tonight, brother. Because people want to hear what this is all about and they want to read what this is all about. And so we're glad about it on tonight. I have a question for you, Dr. Earle, if I can, and then we've got questions that other people are raising up. And so I think this is going to be important. You write in your book that you first became familiar with Klieg in 2012. 12, when you read a book by William Jones that included a chapter on Klieg. In reading it, you were startled because you recall making numerous statements that mirrored Klieg's convictions during your preaching and teaching at Abyssinian in the spring of 2011. What was it that drew you back to Klieg's work when you began this book? Now, let me also say that I've been watching you. Been watching you online. You are a social justice advocate. You are out there on the front lines for your city. You are repping Memphis hard when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to voting rights and all of those things. And so I'm going to marry this question. I'm wondering if this book has had an influence on you in this work that you're doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things coming to mind. One is this is my dissertation revised. My dissertation was written between 2014 and 2018, if I count my coursework and all of that. And anybody who's done Ph.D. studies know every class that you take in the back of your mind is, what you're gonna write in your dissertation. So that's why I say the dissertation took, from 2014 to 2018. And part of what was happening at that time was the movement for Black Lives was showing up strong in Memphis. It would take Andre E. Johnson, one of my mentors and colleagues, and he pastors Gifts of Life Ministries here in Memphis, Tennessee. He's probably the most notable Bishop Henry McNeil Turner scholar. And he's actually the one who coined the term rhetoric, race, and religion. My book is in the rhetoric, race, and religion series. He was, they had a celebration for me when I got my Ph.D. at Abyssinian, and he gave some remarks, and he kept saying, Dr. Fisher did this, and this. He helped to organize the Memphis Grassroots Organizations Coalition. He fought for police brutality. Fought against police brutality. He did this. He said, while working on a PhD. And then he did this, while working on a PhD. So being somebody who tries to live at the intersection of spirituality, scholarship, and social justice, I never had the luxury of compartmentalizing the stuff that I was studying and the stuff that I wanted to preach on Sundays. Part of what shocked me as I uncovered Klieg, or stumbled upon Klieg, as I say, is, and I'm sure Bishop Pearson and Bishop Flunder, with your notable and storied history and testimony, can describe what it feels like to think you're the only person who has not bowed down to Baal. And so I'm in a city where at the time, for somebody to say white supremacy in public was seen as way too radical. the stuff that Bishop Pearson just described in terms of the lay of the land now, the Kairos moment, if that's what we want to call it, or the serendipity, all of that stuff 10 years ago just was not the case. And so people were calling me a Muslim or here come Malcolm X because I'm preaching in dashikis. Now they getting dashikis made in China. You know, now everybody's talking black theology, even if they still are.
That Dr. Fisher in China.
So, I mean, the broader point is this: Clegg was a voice, a fresh ancestral voice for me, because it convinced me I was not crazy. That somebody in my ancestral lineage, in the Black faith tradition, in the Black prophetic tradition, and in the Black Christian tradition, had similar things. I mean, I literally was reading William Jones, even though he was kind of, going ham, he was going in, he was interrogating Clegg in a real good way. But I was saying, who is this guy? I said this last week at Abyssinian, and I studied Black liberation theology at Memphis Theological Seminary. I know about Cone. I know about J.D. Otis Roberts. I know about Dwight Hopkins. Why have I never heard about this guy? And it goes back to what I said early on, that the way people curate and gatekeep the parameters of the field and of the faith will not allow us to encounter these more radical and righteous and revolutionary voices, because part of what too many seminaries do, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is seek to moderate the Black prophetic tradition, and in some instances muzzle the militant side of the Black prophetic tradition. So that's one of the things that was so refreshing, is that this voice let me know that I was not crazy, that I was indeed, doing what God had called me to do. And since encountering more of his work, you stumble up on more voices too. So I'm grateful for all of it.
Bishop.
Let me just add one other thing. Not too long ago, Reverend Fisher, we pulled together a group of our leaders that included a whole session with a group of young people, the oldest of which was probably around 31 or 32, but most of them were in their 20s. And we wanted to have a conversation about theology and the time in which we live and how they're impacted by it. A couple of very important things for me to say. Not one of them said anything about COVID, not one word about the COVID. Most of them do not attend faithfully any church. They go from church to church and they go online. That's basically what they do in terms of how they worship. But the other thing is that they are what I would call the newer group of radicals that the church, as we know it, is also seeking to silence. Essentially, it's on both ends. It's on those who have passed away, who were, in our thinking, too radical for us to be comfortably inculcated and absorbed into and respected by the academies and denominations. So we sort of pushed them aside. But then we got a whole nother group on the other side who are too radical for another reason, because they are reframing church as we understand it. And as it won't, I know out of this generation that I am in, that we are in right now, what comes in the generations after us won't be anything like what we call church. And I could see it in their faces. They affirmed each other. They were kind enough not to bust us down while they were talking to us something fierceable. But I could see they kind of wanted to. They were really being nice and choosing words. You should have seen them trying to say things sweetly. But what I realized when I was listening to them talk is that they are also on the other edge of radical, historical radical, present day radical. It seems that we have an obligation to be the door through which these realities can meet each other, to be made whole in our community. We need to hear from the voices that we even toned down because they were just too strong, those voices. But we also need to hear from these voices that are among us, that are spirit filled and called for such a time as this. So I'll say it one other way. I have children and grandchildren. I had parents and grandparents. My grandparents have passed away. My parents have passed away. I am the doorkeeper between two generations in front of me and two generations behind me. I am the one who is responsible to sew this fabric together so that they will know what I know and they'll be able to move that on to the next generation. What I hear you saying is not only to bring the voice of a great warrior, a great justice warrior from the past, but to somehow connect that justice warrior to not only us, but to these young people who need to know somebody was radical before you were born.
Yeah, I could say very quickly. I don't know if Bishop Pearson wanted to add something to that, but one of the chapters in the book is me doing a close analysis and reading or some exegesis on Clegg's sermon. It's entitled An Epistle to Stokely. And it's about Stokely Carmichael. It's about the relationship that Clegg had and was challenging the former Central United Church of Christ that he renamed the Shrine of the Black Madonna. It was the relationship he was challenging his congregation to have with the Black revolutionaries. And in a sense, Bishop Flunder, what he said is, hey, those people out on the front lines, the revolutionaries fighting for social justice and Black liberation, they are the Christians. Right? So that the standard is not something that we cultivate and mediate within the four walls of the sanctuary or even within the confines of the broader institutional church. It is ultimately what we do in the public in the name of freedom, liberation, justice, and all of those things, whereby we get to identify who is the Christian. So it's not about the creeds that we quote, and it's not necessarily, or it's not limited to, let me say it this way, then I'll digress. Those rituals and histories and doctrines and practices are valuable insofar as they prepare us to do the public work of liberation, not in and of themselves. And so one of the things that struck me most about Clegg's impact is that those Black revolutionaries did have an affirmation and an adoration for him, even those who were not in the not to look. People cannot underscore the reach of the Shrine of the Black Madonna as a church. Okay, there's a Shrine of the Black Madonna that was in Detroit. That's Shrine number one. That's the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Harlem, the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Atlanta, the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Houston. So he has tentacles of what becomes the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church all throughout the country. So that's just at the institutional level. So let's not act like people can't do church like this and still build church as institution. But he had relationships with people who were not even connected to the institutional church, healthy, righteous, relevant relationships. Malcolm says of Albert Clegg, I'm telling every Christian that I know in Detroit, they need to attend the Shrine of the Black Madonna. They need to go to Albert Clegg Church. So that's something for us to consider and reconsider, to your point, Bishop Flunder, about how we engage in conversations with these current radicals and revolutionaries. I don't even like the term radical because often it's people doing the most rational thing to fight for justice and freedom and liberation. And the radicals are the people who do the ridiculous stuff like an insurrection at a Capitol because you don't want to accept the results of the election. You know, so, but I know that the way that these things have been rhetorically framed are just what they are. But the broader point, or the more poignant point here is, yes, we have to reconfigure and reconsider ways that we engage with the revolutionaries of our day in a way that lets them know, to your point, Bishop Flunder, baby, you ain't the first one. You can read a little bit of history. You know, you ain't the first one. You ain't the only one. And some of what you think is novel ain't nearly as novel as it is. You just unread, sweetheart, brother man. You know, and we need to tell the church that none of us have a monopoly on the spirit and the movement of God.
This is good. I'm going to let Bishop Pearson give the next commentary on what was just said, but I need you all to know tonight, Facebook Live, first of all, thank you for joining us. You all are hailing in from everywhere. We're going to give away one of Dr. Earle's books tonight. All right. So I need you all to put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. That's hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. We're going to do a free book giveaway tonight. Please type the hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, and we will make sure that you are entered into the raffle for the book. Bishop Pearson, I'm going to let you comment. You're muted. What happened? Bishop Flunder said 2 books.
Yeah, I got to give away 2 books. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Fisher. We appreciate that. Bishop Pearson, you're muted.
Send them out 2 by 2. So one of the great challenges that I'm facing personally, and I think our generation, baby boomers, are facing, is I live, and probably all of us live in homes that when I was a kid, Black people only cleaned. This kind of a home, this kind of a neighborhood. And I'm in Tulsa, where one of the worst race massacres in American history occurred. There's still some redlining here. There's still a lot of prejudice, but my kids don't know it at the level. I was born halfway through the last century, 1953. I'm 22 years into the new century. And Jim Crow supposedly officially stopped in 65. You ask today's young people what Jim Crow or who Jim Crow is, the average Black person can't tell you with any specificity. I was born on the West Coast, and so I didn't feel what you would have felt in Memphis. Though my dad, who was also born in San Diego, felt it at work. My mother was born in Texas. So I was learning, and I'm the last generation. We are. I think probably Dr. Fisher may be a little younger than us, but our generation remembers what our grandparents told us and our I got to meet them both sides, grandparents and great-grands. I heard the stories from their mouths. I didn't have to read it from some white man's book, not even from a Bible. I heard it from their mouths. I went to the little shanties where they lived. I felt part of it when I went to Texas and Arkansas and places like that. Now, how do we get these kids? And then I have friends who were like Miles Monroe. You know Dr. Miles Monroe. He doesn't even have, and my friends in the islands, the Caribbean islands, and none of my friends in Africa, except for South Africa, understand our pain the same way. American Africans, I'm not just an African American, I'm an American African. There are African Africans, there are European Africans, there's Hispanic Asian Africans, but we are American Africans because we were born, I am, several generations in America. My experience of white racism, even our women wearing white wraps over their head and white dresses to church and the white sheet that covered the communion table and the white robes and the white skin. And of course, now we see brilliant, bright, articulated people of color making commentary as specialists and experts every day on everything, on all of the news networks, all of the talk shows. It's just a different world, and we see the best and worst of both. We really see more of the worst in the present generation. Some cop killings, some cop brutality. They don't know anything about lynchings. I have relatives that were lynched. I have relatives that remember that. I remember my grandfather telling me the story of coming out of Texas under the bottom of a wagon to keep the Ku Klux Klan from killing him because he told a white man he wasn't going to pay what he was trying to make him pay at a grocery store. I feel that pain. My children don't. They don't understand the poverty that I grew up with. They didn't grow up in a ghetto. So how we bridge that gap respectfully and responsibly is a challenge. They're not scholars. They're hanging out with white kids, with atheists, Krishna was black. The earlier pictures of Krishna have him black or purple color. Many pictures of the original Buddha is dark complected. Eastern people were darker. Western people were more Anglo and white. The melatonin is different. So we have to talk about these things too, because these kids are not going to get it. You can't get it if you don't feel it. And they don't feel it. They don't even have memories of it. They know ghetto living. You know why folks in the ghetto? You know, the Project Living, and white folks, many of them don't encounter. I meet white people who've never encountered a black person down here in certain of these little outlying cities. They gawk at you like you're deformed or like you're, an alien. So dealing with all that is so much different than the way I dealt with it in the West Coast. And now I'm dealing with a whole generation that are going to integrated schools. I remember being bused to Point Loma High, where my grandmothers and all my aunts and my godmother, they all worked and cleaned those white folks' homes. I hated that school in 1970 when I had to go in 71. Said actually 69, right? Busing started right in 68 and 69. Integration of the schools after Jim Crow stopped illegally in 65. So we're dealing with all that trauma. But today it's just more drama than trauma. We experience trauma. They just experience today drama. And so bridging the gap between that and making it palatable, understandable, and easy to discuss and seemingly relevant to is, I think, a challenge that we need to, as we write the Third Testament.
Bishop Pearson, I concur that there's differences in the trauma, but I don't think that the trauma that people encounter. So I'm 43. I'm in the same way Bishop Flunder described being the bridge or the door to these two generations. I generally, Generation X's, generally navigate the space between the millennials and the baby boom. And so I've seen it too both ways. And I think that there is trauma. Look, if you've been Black in America for 15 minutes, you got post-traumatic stress. I don't care if you were born in 2021 or if you were born in 1921. There are different types of trauma. I agree with that. And I think part of what, to Bishop Flunder's point about CRT earlier, part of what allows the trauma to continue to metastasize and morph into these more sophisticated forms where it's not easily recognizable is the way that we've curated the conversation about what we can discuss. And so on the one hand, we have institutions and organizations, white gatekeepers, things of that nature, that make sure you don't encounter some of these conversations. At the same time, some of us have to take it upon ourselves to be committed to passing the stories down. I'll never forget, I was at the National Civil Rights Museum in 2008. We were supposed to be commemorating the 40-year assassination of Dr. King. And I was in the Masters of Divinity program, heading into the Ph.D. program at the time. At least I thought I would be several years later before I got in. But long story less long, there was a panel with a group of students, and the keynote address that evening, the morning address, my pastor, Dr. Frank Thomas, gave the morning address. He was working on his dissertation on Dr. King. That evening, Maxine Smith, now venerable ancestor, who used to be the head of the SCLC in Memphis, gave the keynote address. They asked her a question. It was the first time I heard a baby boomer say what she said. They asked her, why hasn't Dr. King's dream come to fruition more in 40 years? She said, some of it is my generation's fault. And you can hear the air get sucked out of the room. She said, we got comfortable with a Cadillac in the driveway, a house on the hill, steak and potatoes on the plate, and we forgot to tell the story of the struggle.
She better preach.
So true.
So if the story of the struggle is not being presented in the educational sector because white curators are boxing it out, and if it's not being presented in the homes at the dinner tables because Black people have experienced so much trauma, yes, you're going to end up with these voids that require those of us who have regular and routine platforms, whether it is as a professor in college, as a pastor in a church, as a public speaker or advocate. It is incumbent upon us to recenter these lost conversations. And so that's some of what I am hoping the book causes us to do in conversation. Just say, hey, have we centered enough of these conversations? I didn't know that this happened. I didn't know that these people did that. And then we can start asking, like, well, why don't we know? And then we can ask, not just what don't I know about the broader superstructure of society. What is it that I don't know about my family? I recently interviewed my grandmother's brother because he's the oldest living elder in that generation. And he only stays 90 minutes from, like, I went and interviewed him and played the interview for my family during Christmas.
Wow.
Because at some point, these stories have to get told in ways that may not be readily available and accessible in the academy, but they could be readily available and accessible in our homes. And then I think then we can find more touchstones and consistencies in the different types of trauma so that we could be more relatable one to another. And then we can organize and unify for our revolutionary efforts better.
Let me make this point. I have never, and I'm 69 in March. I have to admit, I have never been more angry in my life about the history of abuse of Black people in this country. I spent a lot of time doing integration, working with Earle Roberts and the evangelicals, and Bishop Flunder and Bishop Brown. You've heard me talk about my conversation with Dr. Price. I called him 2 months before he died to apologize to him for comments I made about his talking about racism in the church. It was real tense, and he was really on it, and that stuff is so pertinent and practical today. And I had sent him a letter and asked him to tone it down because I live in Tulsa and the Hagans and all that stuff. And I said to him, I apologize for not feeling your pain and your passion, because I've been busy trying to build bridges and do the integration thing. And I was trying to ignore the word trauma is the Greek word for wound. So you're correct, Dr. Fisher. We are a wounded people. We're all experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. And so, but I remember that's one of the most powerful and poignant moments in my life as a minister, to call to another minister who was an elder. He was 89 when I spoke to him. He died 2 months later, and said, I'm sorry, I didn't get your pain. I'm living in Tulsa, been here 50 years. I'm still learning about the race massacre. I know Tulsans. I have relatives that never said a peep about it. Bishop E.E. Cleveland, Mother McLaughlin, all those people came from Oklahoma. They left in the 20s right after the riot. And they had this, don't talk about it. It was many of our mothers have not spoken to us about how our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers were sexually abused by white plantation owners and slave drivers who humiliated them and went down on them and treated them like, and to break their will and break their spirit. There's a lot. And here I am approaching my 7th decade, and I'm pretty ticked off. Or maybe I should just say I'm highly motivated to make a difference, to speak out. And so I can't stay away from it. I've lost friends, close friends. I can count on one hand my white Holy Ghost-filled friends who didn't vote for Trump. Twice. And I have been working with these people for 50 years and traveling with them and eating with them. And part of me is crushed by that and hurt and angry. So I'm trying to figure out how many other people are there like me. And you've taught me a lot, Bishop Flunder. You made me confront some things. You just did. But I was sheltered. And how many of us are sheltered around religion and around pacifism? Bishop Mason was a pacifist. He never addressed the racial thing out. He was there in 1918 when the Assemblies of God broke away from the Church of God in Christ. And he had licensed the first Pentecostal preachers, white preachers. But he just was very passive and prayed and fasted. And that Dr. King preached his last message in our headquarters in Memphis, Tennessee. It's like he was saying, okay, you all that speak in tongues and have all this spiritual power, now you get involved. And we didn't. We just prayed and fasted. It was people like you, Dr. Fisher, and the Dr. Kings and the Jesse Jacksons. And I love Al because Al came from Kojic like me, but Al Sharpton is a very vocal activist. He's like a national pastor in some ways. So I'm at this age going through a powerful evolution and somewhat of a revolution. And I think I may be exemplary of what's happening in a lot of Black people's lives right now.
I think you are. I know Bishop Flunder is going to say something, but I must say this. Reverend Earle, what you said about Maxine, our venerated ancestor, is spot on. My grandmother was a gun-toting Christian, right? She didn't take shit from white people at all.
Oh, we can cuss on here? Oh, we can cuss. No, just
you could not walk on her
It
lawn
happens. Okay.
without being
right.
introduced. She needed to know who you were, and if you didn't introduce yourself properly, my grandmother would shoot through the window. So they knew her. The whole community knew who my grandmother was. However, she had
Where?
6 children, South Carolina. She had 6 kids, and she needed order. My mother is the oldest child. She's 82 years old. She needed order. My mother she grew up in Jim Crow. She had to keep order. My mother was the one to keep her siblings in order, right? They had to look a certain way. They had to dress a certain way, right? To be presented when they came before white people.
Presentable.
Okay? They had to be presentable. They could not talk back and all of these things. I understand that piece that's passive. So when I started doing social justice work, my mother was like, "What you doing? What you saying?" Because she thought I was going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? All of these years have passed,
Leave it
and
alone.
she's still living with the fear of something happening to her baby girl out here talking, about Black rights and Black power. So it still does exist. Now, my mother's a different woman now. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of those things still exist in the Black community around Black people and being passive around even hearing this because they fear what might happen, which is why Black Lives Matter has put so many people off and so many people on, depending on where you stand with it.
Fear what might happen, and have bought into the white theological notion that there is no militancy within the framework of true Christianity.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Bishop Flunder. I don't want to take up. Go ahead. I know you're.
This is wonderful. Just 2 little things that came to my mind. We were talking about Mason Temple. Bishop Pearson made me remember many things about the "I Have a Dream" speech from Martin King, Dr. Martin Luther King. But I have a picture, Bishop Pearson, of Dr. Martin Luther King sitting in the pulpit the night that he preached, and Mother Elsie Shaw, who you knew, who was a great prayer warrior of the Church of God in Christ, was sitting behind him, and she leaned forward and engaged him in conversation. I don't have anything about what they said to each other, but he was leaning back, she wrapped her face around forward and laid sort of her cheek on his shoulder to talk to him, to have a conversation with him. And it was a picture of what it is that we are talking about right now. And to know Mother Elsie Shaw was the premier prayer warrior for the church and prophetess for the Church of God in Christ. She spoke more in tongues than she did in English, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
And when she did speak in English, she had the whole denomination in her prayer hands, because everything stopped when Mother Elsie Shaw came to the microphone to speak what thus saith the Lord. I would just give so much to know what that exchange was.
Wow.
Between the 2 of them, because he died right after. But yes, it was just the most amazing thing. But I say it because there was a connection. I don't have any pictures of her talking to anybody except the conversation that she had with him. And I lift that up because it was one of those moments when these 2 things met. This justice work and this spirit-filled moment. Justice work that somehow doesn't seem spiritual, and spiritual work that somehow doesn't seem justice-oriented. And they got together in Mason Temple. I never would have thought Elsie would have been involved in a conversation with him. And I say that just to say that, to hollow it for a moment and say that in my heart of hearts, it is an answer to so much of what we need to be doing right now.
Yeah.
We need to be filled with the spirit and presence of God, and consciously filled, consciously aware of the voice of God and the leading of God and the inspiration and the quickening, of when God wakes you up in the night in a dream, didn't come from the fact that you had gas when you went to sleep. It
Right.
really is a vision and a dream. And to marry that, the Spirit of God to the work in beautiful ways, I want to put that forth as an experience I have in a photograph, and say also to you, I want to see the prophetic people like you, Dr. Earle Fisher, and my precious brother, my show enough brother, Bishop Carlton Pearson, and many of those who are hearing us tonight, to understand that in just a couple of generations, Black is not going to be Black anymore.
Mm.
And what I'm saying by that is that all of our children are intermarrying across several different races. And I see that happening. Yes, it is, and religions. And I see that happening everywhere. We are not going to be able to call out and say, these are the whites, these are the Asians, these are the Blacks. It's a phenomena of the United States anyway, in some ways, if you let me say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to find the principles.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Black liberation principles that won't be connected so much to our skin color only, or to the grade of our hair only, but it's connected to what these great leaders have taught us that we need to capture, because there's freedom for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
When our children are three or four different races, how do we then section it off? This is the Black neighborhood. What happens when there's no such thing anymore? Or this is the white neighborhood. What happens when there's no such thing anymore? What will be the principles?
Good point.
Wow. Let's get married, justice to holiness. And not the kind of holiness that we were taught, Bishop.
Religious holiness, yeah.
Religious, but the holiness and righteousness, to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly before God. And let's marry the principles of Black liberation theology to the human family, so that in some way or other, our people will still survive, no matter what color our eyes are at the end of the day. So,
see, this is why you put Clegg in the Black prophetic tradition, because there's a larger scope of Black liberationist personalities and principles, to your point again, Bishop Flunder. Like, what are the principles that have been consistent across the span of time, across geography, across culture? Now, there's no way for us to discuss the social and the political realities of where we are, and however in the world we might end up in the world you just described, Bishop Flunder, without dealing with the realities of white supremacy over the last 400 years. But again, not as if white supremacy is the only thing, but that it manifests itself in oppressive ways of sexism and heterosexism and homophobia and transphobia and all these other things. So what are the liberationist principles? That's what I hear you saying.
yeah.
And my challenge, I don't know if it's my challenge, my call to our colleagues with this book is, and so what are you preaching on Sunday? Because if we are clear of what the social and the political realities are, and if our theology does not take into account the social and political realities, your theology is irrelevant. What difference does it make in the lives of the people? I have a research assistant. His name is C.J. Randall. At least that's his Facebook name. His real name is Chris, but C.J. Randall on Facebook. And he's putting in the thread, or he put in the thread earlier, the essay that I wrote called Sermonic Militancy that just was published. But Bishop Flunder, when you were speaking, I thought about something I was asked to write for the Berkeley Forum at Georgetown that just came out last Thursday. And it's a blog. You can find it online. I'll find a link or share it or something like that. And the title of it is Black Liberation Theology and Movement for Black Lives, a Match Made in Heaven. That's exactly what you're describing, Bishop Flunder. And this is what I was trying to articulate. Like, hey, folks in the movement need a spiritual anchor that's stronger than just empowerment brunches and spa days and mimosas. And then people of faith need a stronger justice-oriented and liberationist anchor than just I'm going to pray about it and speak in tongues and dance and tithe. Although, All of those things are part of the Black religious experience. So, yes, we do need to weave these things together. I suggest we start with having these conversations with our colleagues, especially those who are pastoring churches, who are addressing congregations every week with white evangelical theology and blackface, and then frustrated, as Bishop Pearson had to articulate, when you realize white nationalist Christians don't give a damn about what is the truth insofar as Christianity is concerned. They are committed to the maintenance of white nationalist power, in the words of Malcolm, by any means necessary. That's what January 6th is. That's what's happening in the GOP movement. That's what's happening in governors' mansions like the one in Tennessee and the one in South Carolina and the one in Louisiana and Georgia. You know, this is what's happening. This is why we can't get a bill passed. And so I again say, what are you going to be preaching Sunday? Your breakthrough is around the corner? I mean, what the hell? Like that is the type of theological presentation ad nauseum that keeps our people in bondage. And hopefully, you know, books like these, and it's not the only book, but hopefully these books and books like this and preaching like yours, Bishop Flunder, and you know, the testimony that you all have shared can call us into account for what we're preaching and what its ultimate impact is. Whether it's some mystical and mythical individual salvation or whether it's a communal liberation.
Let me just say, this might be a part 2 going on here because Facebook is lit. The people have questions. I mean, you know, they just run it over with this stuff. But I mean, really, Dr. Fisher, you are spot on with your assessment that you just made and other things that you have already said. I think that it's going to move us into a further conversation. I have questions here that I know that I can't get to all of them, but I'm going to make an attempt to get to some while we are waiting for questions and while you all are still sharing this conversation, because you all know that there's somebody that needs to hear this conversation. Your auntie and them, your auntie and them, you know, somebody done said something about Centers for Spiritual Living and Unity churches that they need to hear this conversation, right? I think that it's empowering. We need to hear some of the comments. I believe this is Darnell Ishmael, but he has another name, and I'm just going to say Dr. Ashango. He says, I live in Flint, Michigan, and have heard of the Shrine of the Black Madonna as a byword among the Black Pentecostal churches that I grew up in. I only encountered the truth of Klieg this year during my doctoral program at PSR. I now understand that Black political theology from its earliest origins was about more than just Black liberation, but also included Black power and the Black Imago Dei. This is what I'm talking about. This is the exposure that students need in seminary, right? He is on a doctoral journey already. He didn't get this in his first round of seminary, which brings us to the question that this beloved sister has asked. Must theological seminaries that are heavily concentrated with a white supremacist religious curriculum reevaluate how their indoctrinated curriculums miseducate all seminary students? Oh, the quick answer is yes, but I'm going to let Bishop Flunder, Dr. Fisher, and Bishop Pearson go to it.
I got my answer is yes, yes.
My answer is yes, and we have to be mindful of the fact that these institutions were constituted in a way that diminishes any commitment to Black liberationist theology and praxis. However, there are a few notable exceptions. ITC in Atlanta, Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, right? So maybe instead of trying to reform and revolutionize some of these strict, hardcore, white supremacist adjacent institutions, you find the ones that you know are already engaged in this type of reconstitution and restructuring, or those who have had a long storied legacy of that type of commitment and invest your time, your talent, your treasure in those institutions. The brother who talked about Clegg's Flint location, that shrine is not active anymore, but Clegg has shrines all over Michigan. I just talked about the notable ones around the country to talk about his reach. But those institutions locally end up becoming defunct because the people in those locales either are exploited insofar as their economic endeavors are concerned. So we overworked and underpaid, overtaxed, and don't have the expendable income to support some of these institutions, or figure, well, what we got a black college for? What do we have these black institutions for? If we have to also fund all of this extra stuff too. So I say yes, we can and we should challenge them, but and we should be very intentional about where we invest our academic and intellectual time, talent, and treasure. And we should also challenge churches to do a better job, because people who will never step foot in a seminary are going to be in Bishop Flunder's church tomorrow or Sunday, going to be in Bishop Pearson's congregation. And so we have to try to condition our colleagues. If we had 15% of black preachers preaching black liberation theology, there would be a spiritual and liberationist revolution in the country in 10 years. And that's 15%. Right now, we can name right now, all of the preachers that we know, thousands of preachers we know across the country. If I asked you to give me 100 black liberationist preachers, we would draw straws by the time we got to 25. So I'm saying 15%. We have to do what we can with these seminaries, but we also have to understand there are going to be some people who encounter God and the conditions of our society every day that won't be in a seminary. And so we have to try to find a way to challenge our colleagues who are leading these people to do a better job of preaching and teaching and practicing black liberation.
One of our challenges in the church is that a lot of these black preachers don't even know what black liberation theology means or is, and they think they're already liberated because they got a church and an offering every Sunday, drive a Cadillac, they live in a nice neighborhood, they then moved out of the black neighborhood to the white neighborhood. They think they're liberated, and they go to the seminary to be inseminated. We need to reseed everything. That's what the word seminary comes. There's the white man has inseminated us with this hierarchical mentality, the white supremacy, not only of the race, but of the religion. We are all supremacists in that sense, and we wrestle with it. We've heard a lot about victimization and too far about victory. We're not just victims of circumstances. We're victors over them, and what we need to show and tell how powerful we are and were and have been through all of this, in addition to all the horrible things that have happened to us. I was raised around not liberation theology. I was raised around victim consciousness. The black man, the white man's against the black man, we're the underdog and all that kind of mentality. I'm of the generation that just came out of that. So I'm still trying to mix the two and value them and not throw them away, but not make one Lord over the other, or not make one dismiss the other. Both are our realities. Can't say that identically to the generation that we're in right now, but we need to know more about inventions that black people have done, from the stoplight to modern science, the internet. Blacks have a lot of roles to play and have played for centuries. African Americans and American Africans and African Africans have come up with stuff. We're the first civilization of the planet. We were the higher intelligences and intelligentsias. We built Egypt. And we built pyramids, not just manually. We were in contact with ever higher intelligence, taught us how to put millions of tons of rock on top of each other and build it all the way up to the top. So we don't hear that. The white man has written us out, and that's all European influence. In the East, Black Madonnas are very common. In the West, they are not. In the East, female leadership in ministry is more common. In Africa, it is the queen mother that decides who the successor to the king is in most of the tribes of Africa. Women had a very powerful role. The earliest god were goddesses in history of religions around the planet. So patriarchy and white male arrogance, dominance, ego. Trump is a primary example of it, and he's been exposed to help us expel that entity. And his tail is in trouble, and all of his people are going to get got before this is all over. There's a cleansing coming. There's a purging coming. And Black people, Black male and female, and the Black female, probably more than any other time in history, is going to be the dominant influence in the country and maybe in the culture. It's just happening without our permission. It's just happening. There are more females in seminary. There are more females in medical school. There are more females studying technology and becoming corporate executives, and they're powerful. So a lot of changes are taking place, and a whole generation, new generation, and I'm not talking about kids that are in their teens. I'm talking about kids that are in kindergarten that see more Blacks on television, more integrated couples, more same-gender loving couples. They see more Asian faces on television as acting roles and playing. They don't have the same hangups that we grew up with. Every time I see a Black face on television making commentary about anything, I say to my kids, but they don't get it. Look at this. Look who's making a comment on it. And then another Black. All the morning shows, all the night shows. We're everywhere. So a change is occurring as we speak. We must bridge it and reseed it and come up with some different seminaries.
Yeah, I wanted to say about that. I'm with you, Dr. Fisher, in terms of supporting ITC, and I see somebody put Rochester. Wait a minute, let me make sure that I get that name of that school right. Somebody talked about Star King School for Ministry. Somebody talked about Colgate, Rochester, Crozier Divinity School. But I'm all for us creating our own. Right. And I believe that we have the power and the ability with the 15% that Dr. Fisher named, amen, to get that money together. I'm always talking about, let's get that money together. There are people that have the money, even if it's not within our immediate circle. We have access to people that have the money that want to help us create these kinds of institutions where Dr. Earle Fisher could be a professor, where, all of these people, Bishop Flunder, Bishop Pearson, all of you be professors in these schools and start teaching about what the people really need to know about, right? And so that we don't come out of seminary so damn angry.
Yeah.
Okay. Come on now. We talk. Not just angry and in debt. Come on.
Well, we also had to demystify it.
Right.
For many years, we didn't think we could go. We didn't think we had the brain power to go to college even. Yeah. And I remember my first foray into theological education. They told me that they had classes for youth training of youth and music classes for women. That was that was when I first tried to go, and things did change. But we did the institution through which we did what we needed to do for ourselves was often the church. If we didn't like the food, we started our own restaurant. We fried our own chicken. We made our own sweet potato pies and sold them in the beauty shops and the barber shops, am I right? And the popcorn balls out the trunk of our cars. And we did whatever we needed to do to build our own churches, to create the institutions. And it is not above us. It is just something that, to your point, Bishop-elect Vanessa, I don't want to lose that. It's not above us to create institutions. It's just something in some ways that we haven't done yet. And we're not altogether sure. But there was a time we didn't play basketball. And there was a time we didn't golf. And there was a time, we didn't do gymnastics in the world competitions, right? There was a time when lots of things we felt were outside, and all that we could do is go to the ones that are there and seek to reform. But along the lines of that, I think you're right. I think in some ways we need to create what it is that we really believe needs to be left in the earth to speak to some of the things. And then if the leaders lead, then the others will follow. There is something about that that's we need to kind of put on the shelf, but in the front, and think about what that means in terms of training and institutions. What does that look like? We're capable of that. We have the money to do it. And I think that we have the goodwill among some of our very, very well-heeled Black folks and non-Black folks to demonstrate what this theology looks like, to prioritize it over the Germans. God bless them. God bless them. But I got a little tired of them too after a while. I just have to tell you the truth. But we trained the schools as much as the schools trained us.
Yes.
And I know that may sound, I don't know, at least pretentious to some degree.
Sounds true.
They didn't know.
Sounds true.
You hear me then, brother. They didn't know what we knew until we went. And then that changed the whole dynamic in many ways. Thank you, Brother Earle. You all right with me?
I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to say something that Patrick Dugan has said. He said Black people owned $27 million in church property in 1880. $27 million in church property in 1880.
Wow.
We owned it.
We owned it.
Wow.
Lock, stock, and barrel, y'all.
Our own buildings.
Our own buildings.
That's right.
Wow.
And look, I can guarantee you they weren't contracting with white contractors to build those buildings either.
No, of course not.
Absolutely.
So I hope that this doesn't divert the conversation. But I want to say, as the resident Gen Xer in the conversation, I'm always torn between the necessity of creating the new institution or implementing the new canons, which is necessary, and back to the point that was made earlier, realizing that there's not always a need to reinvent the wheel. Now, I know some of these are not wheels that we are inventing, but in some instances, and this is where my struggle is, when I hear us talking about building institutions, the Black institutions, this is like what HBCUs were. I know that they are historically connected in several instances to white philanthropy. I know that. And I also know we're talking now about what it means to create institutions and saying the money is out there and the money is going to come from somewhere. And often it's not going to come solely from Black spaces. So I'm wondering, like, how do we chew the meat, spit out the bones? How do we hold fast to that which is good? And then how do we also allow for the space and the cleansing that Bishop Pearson has talked about and the creation that Bishop Flunder talked about of the new thing in the earth? And I think that is a long, drawn out, detailed conversation, because our inclination in this neoliberal environment is to disregard all of the stuff that we think is old and outdated. Now, there are some times and there's some things that just need to go that are defunct. I'm sure that there's some criteria that we could establish, but I do want to say there are institutions and organizations that our ancestors erected, constructed, cultivated, and need to be sustained. And there are some new things that just need to be developed. So I'm usually waffling between those.
I think it's a both and. I don't think it's an either or. Because new doesn't have to be a new building. New has to be new thought. It can be the same building. But if we're preparing people, if we're really preparing people for right now, we need to overhaul to some degree some of the institutions that are our institutions too.
One of the things that I know we have to close, Bishop-elect, but the building that Dr. King preached his last message in, the State Temple, the national headquarters of the Church of God in Christ, I went to that neighborhood the first time when I was around 14 years old. I've been there several times since. That's the headquarters of our movement, Yvette, you know that. That neighborhood today is the same as it was the night he was shot and the night he preached. Now, churches all over
Bishop Pearson, before you move on, I need to, as the Memphian here, say, and it's less than 3 blocks, less than half a mile from Lemoyne, my alma mater, the Lemoyne College, the HBCU in Memphis. That's all of that. All of that. I can walk from Mason Temple to Lemoyne College in less than 10 minutes, right up the street.
Now, what does that say to you?
The point that you're making, and I didn't want to undercut your point. I wanted to accent it by saying,
no, I know.
Back to this. Yeah, mm-hmm.
I know that's our. Now that ain't the white man's issue. That's ours. We were given the Chiska Hotel. I think that's what they called it. And I took some very wealthy white people there to show them my headquarters, and I saw the hotel. I was embarrassed. Now, the black churches, black education, there are black millionaires in Memphis. We have been missing it somewhere. And that part I don't blame on the white man, except he has suppressed our thinking and victimized us till we think it's okay to live in poverty. I know a young white boy that grew up in my church. He's now in his 40s, a very successful businessman. He moved to Memphis, and I asked him, he owns houses in those neighborhoods and are leasing them out. Those Negroes have been leasing and renting them same houses owned by white people for 100 years. They don't own them. Now, that's right there in Memphis, Tennessee. That's the headquarters of our denomination. And I'm speaking it indictingly and invitingly. Let's change. We can talk about it.
With 6 million members.
They claim 9 million, but you're right. And how many hundreds of millions of dollars?
That all go
out of money.
That all go up.
Yeah.
Well, so there it is, and everybody is dressed to the nines.
Oh yeah.
But that one kind, so there it is. It can still be ours. We just need to do ours differently. Here's the question: is are we applying these principles to our own institutions and our own cities and our own neighborhoods? And I think that there's something to be said about the way that is the history of the Black church.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do. But what we're trying to do is move out to the suburbs. You know how we do.
Yeah.
You know how we do. So yes, we need to pick that up. We need to talk about how this justice theology lives itself out. Yes, it should be in the pulpit, but how does it get from the pulpit to the street corner? That is the real question that we have. And so, yes and amen. We won't ever leave, Bishop-elect Vanessa, because I know this crew.
I love it. Listen, we have captured the attention of so many. And so my question to Dr. Fisher is, are you available next week? Because if you are, we will do a part 2. And if you say yes to next week, I'm going to ask everybody, the hundreds of people that are up here now, to bring one more person with them next week so that we can do another deep dive into this conversation.
At the risk of my lovely wife, Denise, roasting me.
Don't mess with Denise now.
I'm going to say yes, pending my schedule. Yes is my commitment, and I'm pretty sure I can make it happen. I feel like I would be foolish to pass up a conversation or episode 2 of 3 Bishops and a Jackleg. I mean, who would want to see the follow-up? I mean, come on. No,
because I got some more questions. I want you to know.
And we will buy at least 2 more of your books.
2 more.
Can I say one thing about the book thing before?
Please.
So let me say, yes, I am committed to it, and I think we can make it happen. And I can't express the depth of my gratitude for you all, not just invite me once, but being crazy enough to think I should come back. For those who are interested in getting the book, and there are going to be some books that we give away, I'm committed to giving some away. I have to give a caveat, and I even announced this on my Facebook page the other day. We can say that this is a fantastic thing. I don't know enough about publishing to know, but my books are on back order. They are published. We still hard copy, so they published the order. I've been waiting on an order that I put in December. And so there are people who have already purchased them, and I'm supposed to be signing them and sending them and all of that. So I am asking that people purchase them through the link that has been shared. And I'm also asking for your patience. I am going to do all I can to make sure everybody who wants the book gets it. Just regretfully, I cannot promise an expedient turnaround because either so many people want the book and they can't print them fast enough, or maybe the publishing company is just not handling his business properly. Either way, I wanted to make sure I offered that caveat to everybody, and
Wish you could.
definitely want to get something.
We clearly understand that. We have other authors who also have books on back order. And so when people win, we explain that, they understand it. Eventually they get the book. And so it's okay.
And these days, everybody's trying to make their books downloadable. Like Kindle. And
you can. The book is available on Kindle. The book is available through Amazon. I just prefer people go another route, because anybody who knows me knows I would not charge $95 for my book. It's still hard copy, right? So it's not a paperback yet. You got to sell a certain amount before it gets to paperback. And for those who want to go through Amazon and buy it out, go ahead. My preference is that you go through the link that's been provided in the chat. Yeah.
We understand exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And there is a link. People are asking about the link. Look in the Facebook chat, look below, and you're going to see that link there so that you can order the book. Listen, this is the deal. Dr. Fisher is coming back next week, family. I need you all to bring one more person with you. Bring the family to the meeting for part 2. Bring the family to the meeting for part 2. This is a really, really, really great discussion, and we appreciate all of you that have helped us engage in this conversation. I don't think that they wanted. I think that this has been a long conversation, but I'm going to ask, because they asked that Bishop Flunder and Bishop Pearson sing. I don't know, maybe a liberation song. I don't know.
He'll have to choose it.
All right, Bishop Pearson. I'm muting myself.
I'm so glad that the Lord saved me.
That's that. I don't know about that.
I'll follow you. I'll follow you, Bishop. Whatever you come up with.
Bishop, how about "Fix Me"?
Okay. How about? Is that okay?
I don't remember it.
That is
fix me.
Okay.
You choose the key. I'll come with you.
Go where you are. Stay where you are.
Fix me. Fix me. Fix me, Jesus. Fix me. Heal me. Heal me,
Jesus.
Heal me.
That is our prayer for you tonight, with everything that we've heard. Bishop, from Bishop Pearson, from Bishop Flunder, that God would heal us, because what we're experiencing in this world, in this particular climate that we're in, and from this book, there has all been traumatic for many of us. And so our prayer tonight is that God heal. How do we get healed? Lest we come together as a family. How do we get healed? Lest we come together as a family. Lest we come together and talk about the things that need to be talked about, to face those things that have been challenging us for years, to move us forward. And Dr. Fisher has done that with this book. We want to come back on next week so that we can be healed and fixed, so that we can help the future generations, the Gen Xers. I know that he's got some gray on his beard, but he's a young man. I think he's just turned 40, right?
43. I'm 43.
43 years old. He's got something to say, and we want the world to hear it. And so we want you to join us next week. Family, don't dip out on us really quickly. We have books to give away, but before we do that, we have announcements. Bishop Flunder is going to take care of the first announcement.
God bless each of you. What an incredible opportunity to share. What an empowering moment. What a spiritual moment. And I want to say to all of you who are listening tonight, whether you are with Beyond the Gatekeepers for the first time or that you are an active listener to this broadcast, help us to continue to keep this broadcast available. We are being changed in this most peculiar time and being made ready, as Bishop Pearson has said many times, for the things to come. Be a supporter. You can do that by sending a donation via Cash App to $TFAM Annual, TFAMANNUAL, or to PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. God bless all of you who have supported us in the past. If you are new to this experience of the Gatekeepers, then during this time, your first time perhaps, be of support so that we can keep doing it. God is blessing. Be a part. God bless you.
Hello everyone, this is Jess Dominic, owner of Bulletin Flight Radio, your story, our station, a proud supporter of progressive Christians from around the world. So please join us every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. until 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the best in gospel house, gospel indie, and inspirational word. And if you're looking to submit your music or sermons, please send us an MP3 and artist pick to bulletinflightpros@gmail.com. All submissions are free. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.
And we have Antonio Mattier, lifestyle realtor. And Lifestyle Global Properties presents Donate to Your Church. Give to your church while accomplishing your goal of home ownership. Lifestyle Global Properties will donate 10% of the commission earned from your real estate transaction to your choice of City of Refuge, stands for COR, or TFAM, which is the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, in your name when you utilize our brokerage to purchase or sell a property, residential or commercial, in California or in the state of Georgia. If you're interested, please look up Lifestyle Global Properties. Ask to speak to Antonio Mattier. RIM Virtual Experience, TNT, Tuesday Night Talks. I love that. RIM Fellowship United Church of Christ invites you to join them every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for everyday, real, relevant, Bible-led conversations. You can look for them on www.rimatlanta.org. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at RIM Fellowship UCC, where the senior pastor is Bishop-elect Sonia E. Williams. Please join them on Tuesday nights. They really have wonderful conversations. You can also make a purchase at the Healing Place Apothecary. The owner and founder is Nubian Flunder. She is the daughter of our presiding bishop, and you can purchase her products that she hand makes by going to www.thp, which stands for the Healing Place Apothecary.com. That's www.thpapothecary.com. Please support Black-owned businesses. Go to www.skymichelle.com, where you will find Sky Michelle's Teas and Things, where a kid is the boss. Sky Michelle is the kid boss. She has a collection of t-shirts, varied ones, Dope Black, Faith, White, Flunder quotes, Kara motivational quotes. Customization is available of any kind of t-shirt you want. If you don't see it, follow her on her Facebook page or her Instagram page at I Am Sky Michelle, or you can go to her website at www.skymichelle.com. And I know that people need technical work done. Please look into Kara Solutions. Focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. This is owned and operated by Susan A. Webley. She is the founder. And if you need remote production done in video conferencing, administration, or tech support, Kara will do the heavy lifting so you can focus on your event. She does custom branding, promo graphics, overlays, intro, outro video presentations, show development, planning with guest engagement, etc., training, Zoom, StreamYard, Restream, and more. And if you want more information, you can visit her website at www.cara-solutions.com. If you have an idea for a live show but not sure how to get started, she can help develop a strategy for your broadcast from conception to execution. If you need a free consultation, please go to her email, sue@cara-solutions.com. If you want to advertise with Beyond the Gatekeepers, and we are grateful for all of those that have been advertising with us for so long. We're grateful for all of these businesses. If you want to advertise with Beyond the Gatekeepers, please send us an email at beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. That's Beyond the Gatekeepers with an S show@gmail.com. All right, we have some books to give away, and so we're going to get ready to get started. Thank you for staying with us, Facebook Live and YouTube. Our first winner is Yvonne M. Williams Windsor. Yvonne M. Williams Windsor. Yvonne, please put in the inbox. Go to the inbox and make sure that you put your name and your address in that inbox so that we make sure that we have your contact information. Going for the second win. And our second winner is Debbie Brown. Debbie Brown, please do the same thing. Go to our inbox. Make sure you put down your name, address, city, state, zip code, so that we can make sure that you get your book. Thank you so much for participating on tonight. We are so excited to have had Dr. Earle Fisher. There's going to be a part 2. And you promised that you were going to bring the family with you to join in with us. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Bishop Flunder. Thank you, Bishop Pearson. Thank you, Dr. Fisher. By God's grace, we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.